and who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. Before we dive into the full story, do us a quick favor. Hit that like button to support the channel. Thanks. The bust happened in the Kanchari region, right near Burkina Faso's border with Togo. During a routine patrol, border guards spotted something unusual: a long convoy creeping along the border late at night, a time when the area is usually quiet. The convoy's size and odd timing immediately raised red flags. Captain Musa Kabore, the border commander, alerted senior officials. Initial intelligence claimed the trucks were carrying humanitarian aid, but that didn't sit right. Who moves aid shipments at midnight? And why use back roads instead of the main route? President Traoré didn't hesitate. Sensing something was off, he called in Special Forces Commander General Ibrahim Traoré and gave a clear but cautious order: intercept that convoy, but be careful. This might be more than just smuggling. Special Forces quickly moved into position, setting up a covert ambush along the convoy's path. Drones and helicopters began tracking the trucks from above. At 4 a.m., they made their move, blocking the road just as the trucks rolled in. Caught off guard, the drivers tried to flee, but they didn't get far. Within minutes, everyone was captured. When they opened the first truck, the team was stunned. Inside what looked like sacks of humanitarian supplies were AK-47s, M16s, rocket launchers, grenades, everything you'd expect in a full-blown military arsenal. And every truck was the same. Captain Kabore immediately called the president. "Mr. President, you won't believe this. These trucks are packed with enough weapons to supply an entire army." President Traoré, calm but firm, responded, "Collect everything. Don't lose a single bullet, and make those drivers talk. We need to know who's behind this. Someone is preparing for war in Burkina Faso." The scale of this operation and the kind of firepower involved suggest this is no small-time smuggling ring. The real question now is, who's planning what and why? One of the captured drivers, Jean-Baptiste Compaoré, was the first to break. Shaking with fear, he finally spoke. "They told us we were hauling agricultural machine parts, said we'd drop them off at a warehouse in Togo, and from there they'd be shipped overseas. But as the investigation dug deeper, the story unraveled, and what came to light was staggering. Most of the drivers had no idea what they were really transporting, but whoever organized the operation, they knew exactly what they were doing. Each truck had been sent off from a different location at different times with different routes. They only joined up right before crossing the border, a deliberate move to avoid suspicion. By the second day, investigators were uncovering even more disturbing details. Burkina Faso's intelligence team managed to recover partial serial numbers on the weapons, even though many had been filed off. Using advanced forensic tech, they traced the weapons to surprising sources. Some were from the Libyan civil war, others had been used in Yemen, and some were brand new, straight from the factory, never fired once. The total value of the haul, over $100 million. That raised a massive question. Who had the kind of money to fund this? And what were they planning? President Ibrahim Traoré immediately called an emergency National Security Council meeting. The full inventory of the seized arsenal was laid out on the table. 15,000 AK-47s, 5,000 M16s, 3 million rounds of ammunition, 50,000 hand grenades, 1,500 rocket launchers, 200 anti-aircraft missiles, and 20 tons of explosives. Defense Minister General Sadou Traoré was stunned. This isn't just a shipment. You could invade an entire country with this firepower. Interior Minister Hosseini Compaoré added grimly, if these weapons had made it into the wrong hands, Burkina Faso would be in chaos right now. Terror groups could have launched a long-term insurgency. Worse, this could have been used to stage a full-blown coup. President Traoré stood and addressed the room. This isn't random. This is part of a much bigger plan to destabilize our country, just like Libya, Syria, and Yemen. But we're not asleep. We've just stopped something huge. Then, the head of intelligence, Commandant Ouedraogo, delivered another bombshell. "Mr. President, one of the drivers just gave us a name. The weapons were headed to secret warehouses in Ouagadougou. That's where they were going to be distributed. Without hesitation, President Traoré made a decisive move. Launch a full-scale operation in Ouagadougou. Search every suspicious warehouse. Find out who was waiting for these weapons. And most importantly, track the money. Follow the financing. That's where the truth lies. This is no ordinary smuggling case. This is an attempt to ignite a war from the shadows, and Traoré just might have stopped it in time. The next day, dawn. Operations began in the capital, Ouagadougou. Simultaneous raids were conducted on 23 different addresses. More weapons were found in 17 warehouses. The size of the weapon stocks was mind-boggling. Among those arrested were very familiar names: former ministers, retired generals, wealthy businessmen, and even some foreign diplomats. Their common feature was their opposition to the Traoré administration. On the fourth day of the investigation, the operation took a jaw-dropping turn. One of the arrested suspects, prominent businessman named François Bonkungu, cracked under pressure. His confession hit like a bombshell. Shaking, barely able to speak, Bonkungu said, "This wasn't just about weapons. The plan was set in motion months ago. Foreign powers promised us their support. The goal was clear: overthrow President Traoré and install a pro-Western puppet government." President Ibrahim Traoré leaned in and asked the million-dollar question: which foreign powers? Bonkungu hesitated, then finally revealed the planning meetings were held in Accra. Some delegates came from Abidjan. The instructions came from Paris. And we got the green light from Washington. The room fell into stunned silence. No one moved. Traoré calmly said, "Go on." Bonkungu laid it all out. Here was the plan: stage terrorist attacks to create mass panic, use the chaos to mobilize opposition groups, then, with help from traitors inside the army, launch a military coup. Even worse, this wasn't some amateur plot. The operation had a name: Operation Restored Democracy. Its budget, $200 million. The 47 trucks of weapons were just phase one. Bonkungu dropped more names. Some of them were jaw-dropping. Allegedly involved were diplomats from Western embassies, executives at multinational corporations, even officials from international NGOs. President Traoré knew the world needed to see this with their own eyes. He called a nationally televised press conference, one that would go down in history. Behind him stood a towering display of the confiscated weapons. Viewers at home were shocked by the sheer scale of the arsenal. He began, "My fellow Burkinabe and to the international community, 3 days ago we intercepted the largest weapons smuggling operation in our country's history. But this was more than smuggling. It was part of a coordinated plan to destroy our nation from within." Holding up a stack of classified documents, he continued, "Here is the proof. 47 trucks, $100 million worth of military hardware. The goal, to plunge Burkina Faso into chaos, to pit our people against one another, and to install a government that answers to foreign powers, not to our citizens." Traoré's voice grew firmer. "Where did the weapons come from? I cannot reveal all the details yet, but know this: imperialist powers still think they can control Africa. But we are no longer asleep. We are wide awake." Journalists in the press room burst into questions. CNN: which countries are behind this? Traoré: the investigation is ongoing, but some weapons were manufactured in NATO countries. BBC: who are the masterminds? Traoré: so far 17 individuals have been arrested, including former ministers and generals. Informants are talking. The full truth will be known soon. Al Jazeera: how will this impact regional security? Traoré: this isn't just an attack on Burkina Faso, this is an attack on all of Africa. Similar plots are unfolding in Mali, Niger, and Guinea. We must unite. Russian press: will you tighten security? Traoré: absolutely. The army is on high alert, borders are locked down, and most importantly, our people are with us. To close the press conference, Traoré played a video clip of Bonkungu's full confession. The businessman appeared on screen, tears streaming down his face. "They lied to us. They said we were bringing democracy, but all we would have done was destroy our own country. Traoré was right. We betrayed our people. I'm sorry. I was wrong. The room fell silent. Then Traoré ended with a powerful statement. That's the real face of this plot. People willing to sell out their country for money and power, but they failed, and they will continue to fail, because Burkina Faso stands united. By the 5th day of the investigation, things took a turn no one expected. Authorities began combing through data recovered from seized laptops and phones, and what they uncovered was chilling. This wasn't just a plot against Burkina Faso, the entire Sahel region was in the crosshairs. According to the documents, separate plans had been drawn up for multiple countries. In Burkina Faso, they'd take down President Traoré. In Mali, it was Assimi Goïta. In Niger, General Chiani was the target. In each case, the goal was the same: install pro-Western leaders who would follow foreign interests. The documents also revealed the scope of the financing. $1 billion was allocated to execute the plan. Investigators began following the money trail, which pointed to some Gulf nations and European networks. It was clear this conspiracy wasn't just local, it was global. President Ibrahim Traoré called a second press conference. This time, his tone was fierce, his message unfiltered. The masks are off. Those who want to recolonize Africa should listen carefully. We are the grandchildren of Thomas Sankara. We will not kneel to anyone. He held up a new set of documents that left the room stunned. They had already drawn up the names of the new government, a full list of ministers, departments, and even their first policy actions. This wasn't just planning. They had been ready to take power. Look at the arrogance, Traoré said. They divided up our ministries before even toppling our government. But they forgot something. The people of Burkina Faso own this land, not them. Among the newly detained suspects were foreign nationals. 3 French citizens, 2 British, 1 American, and surprisingly, 2 Israelis. All carried diplomatic passports, but none were actual diplomats. Their arrests sparked a global diplomatic firestorm. Western governments immediately demanded their release, but Traoré stood firm. Having a diplomatic passport does not give you permission to commit crimes on our soil. On day 6, the accused were brought to court. The charges were serious: attempting to overthrow the state, organizing a terrorist group, weapons trafficking, and even treason. The courtroom was packed with citizens demanding justice. The suspects looked broken. Some cried, others apologized, but it was too late. The prosecutor's case was airtight, filled with audio recordings, surveillance footage, bank transactions, and even full confessions. Even defense attorneys struggled to find a way to respond. Meanwhile, international pressure on Burkina Faso mounted. Some Western nations threatened economic sanctions if the foreign detainees weren't released. But Traoré didn't flinch. History will judge those who try to intimidate us. While some Western nations applied pressure, others stepped up in support. Russia declared Traoré had the right to defend his country. China went a step further, offering to donate security equipment to Burkina Faso. We stand with them in the fight against terrorism. Turkey added their voice. Africa's security is our security. Arms smuggling is a crime against humanity. Iran condemned the plot. Imperialist powers must leave Africa alone. Democracy cannot be delivered at gunpoint. And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro praised Traoré directly. Brother Traoré is today's Simón Bolívar, a hero of the anti-imperialist struggle. On the 7th day, Traoré appeared before the people. Thousands had gathered. His speech was historic. Dear people, a week ago, we prevented a major conspiracy against our country. We seized 47 trucks of weapons, but more importantly, we disrupted the game. We caught those who wanted to turn us against each other. The people applauded enthusiastically. Traoré continued, "This victory is not only ours, but all of Africa's victory. Now no one can play games with weapons in Africa. Now no one can try to make us puppets." Young people kept tempo chanting, "Traoré, Traoré," women shouted victory cries, the elderly shed tears. Traoré finished his words, "Like this, we will melt these weapons and build schools, build hospitals. We will transform death tools into life tools. This is the real victory." When the speech ended, the square was roaring. Everyone was hugging, kissing, celebrating. Burkina Faso had been saved from a great disaster. By day 8 of the operation, the future of the seized weapons was finally clear. As President Ibrahim Traoré had promised, the weapons wouldn't go to waste. Some would be melted down and sold as scrap, with the proceeds going straight into education. Others would be handed over to modernize Burkina Faso's military. The rest would be destroyed permanently. But this wasn't just about disarming a threat. This moment had become a powerful symbol of Africa's awakening. Traoré hadn't just seized illegal weapons, he'd reclaimed the dignity of a continent. His bold stand was a clear message to the world. Africa will write its own future now. And as the shockwaves of the operation spread across the region, a new era was being born. The old tactics of intimidation and control, through violence, bribery, and foreign interference, were starting to lose their grip. 2 days later, on day 10, Traoré made another unexpected move. He called for a massive public gathering in Independence Square, where some of the seized weapons would be put on display. Tens of thousands of citizens showed up, many in disbelief at the towering piles of rifles, rockets, and grenades. An elderly man wept as he stared at the weapons. "They were going to kill our grandchildren with these," a young woman shouted through tears. "If it wasn't for Traoré, we'd already be in a civil war." President Traoré stepped up to the microphone, calm but commanding. "This is what I wanted you to see. This was the future our enemies had planned for us. But we stayed alert. We stayed united. And we won." Then he made a bold promise that brought the crowd to its feet. "With the money we earn from melting these weapons, we'll build 100 new schools, 50 health clinics, and 1,000 kilometers of irrigation canals. Tools of death will become projects of life." As the crowd erupted in applause, a giant cauldron was rolled onto the stage. In front of the nation and the world, the first rifle was dropped into the fire. The metal melted, then was poured into a mold. "The first thing we're forging," Traoré said, "is a school bell, and every morning, when our children hear it ring, they'll be hearing the sound of peace." The scene made headlines worldwide. International observers were stunned. A United Nations representative called it a first in African history, literally transforming weapons into peace symbols. The African Union's special envoy gave a moving speech. Traoré didn't just seize weapons, he changed the direction of Africa's future. Now the entire continent is watching and ready to follow. Meanwhile, back in court, the confessions from the defendants kept pouring in, and the details were darker than anyone imagined. What started as a plot against Burkina Faso turned out to be part of a massive regional conspiracy. The root of the weapons was finally confirmed. The arms had originated in Eastern Europe, passed through Libya, and were smuggled south into the Sahel. At each border, intermediaries, bribes, and corrupt officials helped move the cargo. It wasn't just trafficking, it was a full-blown organized crime network. Traoré handed over the evidence to Interpol, triggering a wave of international arrests. Assets were frozen. Warrants were issued. The global web of arms dealers and political saboteurs was starting to unravel. The story was no longer just about Burkina Faso. This was about an entire continent saying, enough. With leaders like Traoré rising and the people behind them, Africa is stepping out of the shadows of foreign control and into its own future. From weapons to school bells, from fear to unity, from silence to resistance. On the 15th day of the operation, something powerful happened. President Traoré officially declared it a national day of celebration. From now on, every year, this day would be known as National Awakening and Victory Day. In every school across Burkina Faso, students would learn the story. The lessons of courage, unity, and resistance would be passed on, generation after generation. In his final speech, of the operation, Traoré stood. This victory proves that Africa no longer needs to rely on anyone else. We can defend ourselves. We can shape our own future. And most importantly, when we stand together, we are unstoppable. Not by guns, not by bribes, not by lies. Traoré didn't just shut down a massive arms trafficking network. He flipped the script for the entire continent. Africa, he said, will no longer be a dumping ground for weapons. It will be a hub of hope, a source of peace, freedom, and brotherhood. That was the true miracle of this mission. Not the seizure of 47 trucks full of weapons, but the winning of 47 million hearts. And those hearts, they're now beating for freedom, beating for independence, and beating for Africa. Thanks for watching. If this inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.